exhausted. After a long week of press tours and events, all she wanted was a quiet, uneventful flight back to Los Angeles. Dressed casually in jeans, a hoodie and oversized sunglasses, she tried to keep a low profile as she walked through the airport. Unfortunately, not everyone respected her space. "Hey, lady, move it or lose it," a man behind her barked as she hesitated for a second while boarding the plane. Sandra turned, startled. The man was tall, dressed in an expensive suit, and clearly irritated. He looked at her as if she were an obstacle rather than a person. "I was just letting an older woman go ahead," Sandra explained calmly, gesturing to a frail elderly woman she had paused for. The man scoffed. Yeah, some of us have important places to be. You Hollywood types think the world revolves around you." A few passengers gasped. Some recognized her. Others just cringed at how rude the man was being. Sandra, normally quick-witted, felt embarrassed. Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Hey, buddy, how about you show a little patience?" Sandra's eyes widened as she turned to see Keanu Reeves standing just a few feet behind them. He had been watching the entire scene unfold. The rude man's face paled. "Ah, I didn't mean." Keanu gave him a cool, measured look. "You did, but I think you owe the lady an apology." His voice was calm but firm, the kind that made people listen. Sandra couldn't help but smirk. Keanu had always been one of the most respectful people she knew, and seeing him step in for her felt like a movie moment come to life. The man muttered a half-hearted apology before quickly disappearing down the aisle. Keanu turned to Sandra with a small smile. "You okay?" She let out a laugh. "Yeah, you always seem to show up at the right time, huh?" He shrugged. "Just good timing." As they took their seats, coincidentally in the same row, Sandra looked at him with gratitude. "You know, you really are the nicest guy in Hollywood," Keanu chuckled, "and you're one of the toughest. But hey, even superheroes need backup sometimes." The flight attendants started their announcements and Sandra leaned back in her seat, suddenly feeling much better. Some days were just bad travel days, but with Keanu Reeves around, they always had a happy ending. Sandra Bullock, humiliated by man while boarding a plane, didn't know Keanu Reeves was watching. Part 2. As the plane took off, Sandra turned to Keanu with a playful smirk. "So, do you always appear out of nowhere to save damsels in distress, or am I just special?" Keanu chuckled, adjusting his seatbelt. "I think we both know you're no damsel in distress, Sandra, but I couldn't just stand there and let that guy act like a jerk." Sandra sighed, shaking her head. "It's amazing how people assume things about celebrities. Like I don't get special treatment. If anything, I try to blend in." "Well," Keanu said, leaning back, "some people just look for reasons to be rude, but you handled it well." Sandra gave him a grateful look. She had always admired Keanu, not just as a co-star, but as a genuinely good person. They had worked together on Speed decades ago, and despite Hollywood's ever-changing nature, their friendship had remained strong. As the flight settled into a quiet hum, the flight attendant walked down the aisle, stopping at their row. "Mr. Reeves, Miss Bullock," she said with a nervous smile. "I just wanted to say we're huge fans. Can I get you anything? On the house." Sandra laughed softly, exchanging a look with Keanu. "That's very sweet, but we're fine, thank you." Keanu nodded. "Appreciate it." As the flight attendant walked away, Sandra whispered, "See? That's your special treatment, not mine." Keanu smirked. "I'm pretty sure she was more excited about you." Sandra rolled her eyes, but before she could respond, she heard a loud crash from a few rows ahead. A drink had spilled, and as if fate had a sense of humor, it landed directly on the lap of the rude businessman from earlier. Passengers gasped as he shot up, groaning. "Oh, come on! First a delayed flight, then—" He turned abruptly, locking eyes with Sandra, who was trying her hardest not to burst into laughter. Keanu, ever composed, simply raised an eyebrow. The man's face turned red as he grabbed a napkin and mumbled something unintelligible. The flight attendants rushed to help, but Sandra couldn't help but glance at Keanu, who leaned over and whispered, "Karma's quick today." Sandra covered her mouth, shaking with laughter. "You didn't do that, did you?" Keanu smirked. "Nope, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't satisfying." As the flight continued, Sandra and Keanu spent the next few hours reminiscing, laughing, and catching up like old friends who never missed a beat. And by the time they landed in LA, Sandra knew one thing for sure. No matter how chaotic the world got, Keanu Reeves would always be one of the good ones. Want me to continue with what happens after they land? Sandra Bullock, humiliated by man while boarding a plane, didn't know Keanu Reeves was watching. Part 3. As the plane touched down in Los Angeles, Sandra stretched her arms and let out a sigh. Finally. I swear, that was the longest flight of my life. Keanu chuckled beside her. I thought it was pretty entertaining. She shot him a playful glare. Yeah, because you got to watch karma work its magic. Meanwhile, I was just trying to avoid another awkward confrontation with Mr. Entitled Suit back there. Keanu smirked. Well, good news. You won't have to see him again after we get off the plane. Unless, Sandra teased, fate decides to book us all the same Uber. Keanu laughed. At that point, I'd start to believe the universe has a sense of humor. As they gathered their carry-ons and exited the plane, Sandra was relieved to see that the rude businessman was nowhere in sight. But, of course, the moment she stepped into the terminal, a group of fans recognized her. "Oh my God, Sandra!" one of them squealed. "Can we get a picture?" Before she could respond, another fan spotted Keanu. "Keanu! Dude, you're a legend." Sandra gave Keanu a sideways glance. "See? They don't care about me when you're around." Keanu grinned. "I don't know, I think you're selling yourself short." Despite their exhaustion, both actors took a moment to greet their fans, signing autographs and taking pictures. Just as Sandra was wrapping up with a fan, a familiar voice interrupted. "Unbelievable," the rude businessman muttered as he walked past them, rolling his eyes. "Some of us have important things to do." Sandra's smile faded, but before she could respond, Keanu, once again, stepped in effortlessly. "Hey man," he said, his voice as calm as ever, "you ever consider just being nice?" The businessman stopped, clearly caught off guard. He opened his mouth to say something, but Keanu's steady gaze seemed to make him think twice. Instead, the man scoffed and walked away in a huff. Sandra shook her head, watching him disappear into the crowd. "I swear some people are just allergic to kindness." Keanu shrugged. "Not our problem." As they walked toward baggage claim together, Sandra nudged him. "You know, I'm starting to think you were sent to me by some guardian angel or something." Keanu smirked. "Or maybe we just keep running into each other at the right time." She grinned. "Either way, I owe you one." Keanu tilted his head. "Dinner, then?" Sandra blinked. "Are you asking me out, Keanu Reeves?" He chuckled. "I meant as friends, but if you want to make it interesting." Sandra laughed, shaking her head. "You know what? Fine. But I'm picking the restaurant, and if I see you pulling any more heroic stunts, I'm making you pay." Keanu grinned. "Deal." And just like that, what started as a frustrating travel day ended with an unexpected dinner plan. Some things in Hollywood changed, but one thing never would. Keanu Reeves would always have Sandra Bullock's back. The end. Hope you like the full story. Want me to add any twists? Sandra Bullock, humiliated by man while boarding a plane, didn't know Keanu Reeves was watching. Part 4. Later that evening, Sandra stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit. She had picked a cozy but stylish black sweater with jeans, nothing too fancy, but just nice enough in case Keanu did to turn their friend dinner into something more. Not that she was thinking about that. Nope. Definitely not. She grabbed her phone and texted him. "Sandra, are you sure you want me to pick the restaurant?" "Of course, I trust your taste." "Well, I hope you like tacos because I'm in the mood for street food." "Perfect. See you there." Sandra smiled. Keanu Reeves was just different. Most Hollywood actors would have picked some overpriced, paparazzi-packed place, but Keanu, the man just wanted good food and good company. The dinner that almost didn't happen. She arrived at a small, hole-in-the-wall taco stand in downtown LA, a place she had been coming to for years. It was the kind of spot where no one cared if you were famous, just if you knew how to appreciate a good carnitas taco. Keanu was already there, leaning against his motorcycle, dressed in his usual casual black ensemble. The moment he saw her, he grinned. "Tacos? You weren't kidding." "I take my food choices very seriously, Reeves," she said, playfully bumping his arm. They ordered at the counter, Keanu insisting on paying. "You said I'd have to pay if I did anything heroic again. Technically, I saved your dignity on that flight." Sandra rolled her eyes, but let him win this one. They sat at a picnic table, eating under the glow of string lights. The conversation flowed effortlessly, catching up on life, laughing about old stories from Speed, and debating whether pineapple belonged on tacos. Then, just as Sandra was about to take another bite, a familiar voice interrupted. "Well, this is unexpected." Sandra froze. "No way." She turned, and there he was, Mr. Entitled Suit from the plane. Dressed in the same expensive clothes, looking just as smug, he stood there with two equally snobbish-looking men. "Are you serious?" Sandra muttered under her breath. The businessman smirked. "Didn't take you for the street food type, Miss Hollywood. Figured you'd be at some five-star restaurant." His eyes flicked to Keanu. "And you? What's slumming it for the night?" Keanu wiped his mouth with a napkin, setting his taco down. He didn't look angry, just amused. "You have a real habit of underestimating people, don't you?" Sandra leaned forward, crossing her arms. "You know, I was willing to forget about our little plane incident, but now you're showing up at my favorite taco stand with that attitude? You're lucky I don't throw my salsa at you." The businessman chuckled, looking at his friends. "Feisty." Keanu's eyes darkened just slightly. He set his napkin down slowly. "You should probably go." There was no menace in his voice, no aggression, but there was weight, a quiet, unshakable confidence that made the businessman hesitate. For a second he looked like he might argue, but then one of his friends muttered, "Dude, that's Keanu Reeves. Maybe don't push it." The businessman scoffed, but after a tense moment, he turned on his heel and walked away. Sandra let out a breath. "Okay, what are the odds of that guy showing up again? This is getting ridiculous." Keanu chuckled. "I'm starting to think he's secretly in love with you." Sandra groaned. "Don't even joke about that." As they finished their meal, she looked at Keanu with a small smile. "You really do have a way of handling people, you know that?" He shrugged. "I just don't let negativity stick. It's not worth the energy." She studied him for a second. "That's actually a great life philosophy." Keanu smiled. "Took me a while to learn it." As they left the taco stand, Sandra glanced at him. "So, what now? Do we go our separate ways, or do we keep this adventure going?" Keanu smirked. "What do you have in mind?" She grinned. "Ever been go-kart racing at midnight?" Keanu's eyes lit up. "Now that sounds interesting." And just like that, the night was far from over. To be continued. What do you think? Should the adventure continue?